Well, hello again. Welcome to this, the third in our series of the build for the Prinz Eugen. Today we're going to look at the main armament. The Prinz was armed with 8-inch weapons in 4-twin turrets. She also had a number of 10.5cm secondary mountings and a large number of 40 and 20mm anti-aircraft mountings. 2 sets of torpedo tubes and 2 aircraft, I believe, rounded off her armament. We're going to make the main turrets up. 2 of the main turrets had 40mm mountings on top of them, and we're also going to make up a couple of the 10.5cm mountings. These are twin mountings. So let's get a start by having a look at the mountings themselves.
Well, fellow modelling fiends, as part of part 3 of this series, we're going to be constructing the principal turrets, the main turrets, the 8-inch turrets on the Prinz Eugen. Now I have in front of me a number of illustrations of these turrets. Essentially, the 2 lower turrets are slightly easier to build than the 2 upper turrets, because the upper turrets have got gun mountings on top of the turrets and the 2 lowers don't. So in the kit itself, it says make 2 lower turrets, and they're fairly straightforward. Doesn't appear to be any great difficulties with them, but what I've done is I've had a look at the photo-etch parts that have to go with these turrets, and we have to remove the barrels altogether, so that will mean cutting them off the 2 round sections that the axle, if you like, goes through. So we need to cut the plastic barrels away there, leaving these 2 round sections, then drill into these round sections to mount the 8-inch barrels in. No great problems there, that looks fairly straightforward. There is also a ladder which has to go up on at least one side, and I think both sides of the turret. A PE ladder, photo-etched ladder, we have to cut out and put on the side of the turret, again fairly straightforward. There seems to be 2 sliding hatches on the front face of the turret, which seem to be opening. Now whether these are for sight or for ventilation or what, I'm not sure, but again they're PE parts, so they're fairly straightforward to put on. On the barbette there's a number of small pipes and boxes that come as a single PE part for each side, part G7. They go on the top of the barbette, and that seems to be it, fairly straightforward. On the paint guide for the 2 front turrets, for the 2 lower turrets, there is not 1 ladder going up, but 2. But at any event, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make up all 4 turrets. Now I won't be able to put the anti-aircraft mounting on the top of the 2 upper turrets until I've actually made them, so we'll come back to that later. But certainly there are ladders, there's a platform, and a number of boxes on top, which I'm guessing are ready-use ammunition boxes. And on the upper turrets, there seems to be, on the rangefinder hoods, which are on the upper turrets, I know a flap, which again is made from photo-etch, and that would be fairly straightforward to do as well. So that's my plan. Now let's get the kit opened up and get first of all the polystyrene parts out in front, and then we'll have a look at the photo-etch. Well, this is the frets, the polystyrene frets, and the first thing we're going to look for is part G38, which is the lower turret, and probably we'll look at this being turret Anton. And we're looking at G38, which is this one here. This one here is G39. So we're looking at G38, and we are looking to make 2 of these. We'll just make one just now. So we'll take G38 from the fret. I use my fret cutters, and I don't go in close to the part, because if I do, sure as fate I'll cut into it. I leave always a little bit of the polystyrene fret on the part, and you can see it, I hope, here and here, and we'll remove these later carefully to give a nice straight edge there. Now we come to the parts, the other parts we need, and we need 2 parts F13. This is fret F, and parts 13 is that part and that part. These are the gun barrels, the main 8-inch gun barrels. We're going to have to change these and hack them about quite a bit, but we'll take them off just now, again leaving plenty of the original fret there that I can remove afterwards. So we'll take off 2 of these. And that's the gun, the 8-inch gun barrels. We need 1 part F3, which is what goes through the holes in these gun barrels to axle them or allow them to pivot, and parts F3 are up here, and we just need 1 of them, which I'll take off now. So that's 1 of them. And we also need part F15, which is the turret base, and I believe they're all the same, but I've got 2 F15s here, and we'll just take them off. Take 1 of them off anyway. Now, that's fairly straightforward. We have the turret base, we have the turret that sits on top like that, and we have 2 guns that sit inside and sit in the wee trunnions inside the turret, and the turret base goes on like that, and by the time I take the flashing off it'll fit in quite nicely, and that gives us a turret. A lot of cleaning up to be done, so let's take this apart again. There we go. That's the 5 parts: turret, turret base, 8-inch gun barrel, 8-inch gun barrel, and the axle that these pivot on. We've also got a number, excuse me, a small number of photo-etched parts that we need for this. And in the 1st and 4th turrets, basically all it is 2 barrels, 2 sliding hatches that go on the front face of the turret, there and there, and a ladder that goes up the side of the turret there. Now, looking at this turret, that ladder is moulded onto the turret there, and these 2 sliding hatches are also moulded onto the turret there and there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove these mouldings, and I'm going to remove them so that we can fit the photo-etched parts on. But I'm going to check the photo-etched parts first of all to make sure that if I do that it's still okay, because occasionally you get these photo-etched parts sit on top of moulded parts of the polystyrene, and I just want to check and make sure this is not the case. However, the 2 barrels have to come off. Now, when we're taking the barrel off, we're going to have to remove everything from more or less there forwards, and then drill in to the part, to the circular part, to give us a mounting for the brass barrel. So we're going to get these parts out just now, and let's have a look and see how we're going to do this. So first of all, let's get the 8-inch gun barrels out. And here we have them in a little bag. That's the bag open. Let's get a couple of barrels out. So, what we're going to have to do to keep the length the same and as you can see they're actually slightly finer, is it shows us the point where we're going to have to remove the original barrel, and on each gun barrel there's a small pin which I'm looking at and I'm guessing will be somewhere about 0.1 or 0.2 millimeters. No, but it doesn't really matter what size it is. We'll drill into the trunnion part there, and that will give us a small point where we can poke the barrel out. It doesn't really matter how accurate we are at this stage because they're going on these axles anyway, and even if we get them slightly squint, they can be straightened up in the mounting into the turret hood. So I'm not desperately concerned about getting the drilling in exactly on 90 degrees. That will be more important when we come to other guns later, but on this occasion all we have to do is whip that off and drill in, and we have to do that twice, and that's with the two barrels. So as you can see, it didn't really matter that I left that bit there of flashing on. So that is the barrels. We also have to find parts G6 and 7, which you will remember were not delivered to me with the original Flyhawk box. The frets G and H were missing. Deep and everlasting joy, they have turned up. They have arrived at my door, and I'm delighted to say that they are now in the box here, which is why we can move on with part 3. So let's get out fret G, and get out fret G. Now these apparently are sellotaped onto the backing paper, which makes things slightly more difficult because I need to pull out a knife and cut that tape. There's one. It just goes to show how well these parts are actually packed. There we are, that's part G, that's part H. Let's get down to part G. So I should have been a little more careful in taking them off more accurately. So that's part G, we'll leave that there just now, and we'll put part H back in its packaging. Because the very last thing we want to do is lose them. Now I want also part F out. So we found fret F. Which has got stuck onto B and C. So F is that one there. So we'll take it out. Part F. And that's part F. And we'll return this one to the bag. They've got self-sealing flaps on them, these bags, which I think is a good thing. It keeps them, if you pay some attention to how you're keeping these things, then you're not going to lose them. And come back to these parts. The parts that we're looking for are parts G6 and G7. So that there is a part G6 and that there is a part G7, and we're also looking for parts G10 and G11, and here we have G10 and here we have G11. Now there's no equivalent on the polystyrene kit parts of these two, but there is of these two, and looking at them, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the two from the polystyrene turret, and they're moulded on there and there. If you can see that, they're moulded on there and there, and that part will replace them. So we've talked about G6 and 7, G10 and 11, and we need F18, which is a ladder which goes up the side of the turret, and that'll be on this fret here. Right, here we go. And there we have F18, and we'll need 2 of these per turret. So it's 2 for the first turret and 2 for the last turret. I suspect, yes, F19s are the equivalent for the 2 upper turrets. So we'll need to put 2 of these onto the turret. As things are at the moment, the turret has a moulded ladder there, which again I'll remove. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to assemble the turret. I'm going to assemble it, and I'm not going to paint anything until the turret is assembled. At that point I will put a coat of primer on and a coat of the palest of the greys that we have. That is the intended final colour of the turrets. They will also get a coat of Johnson's Clear to protect them, but that will be after I've painted these ladders black, which I may well do before I glue them on, but I'll see when I come to that. So I'm going to show you photographs of the various assembly processes, and the next time I come back to you I'll have both of these turrets finished, turret Anton and turret Dora. The first thing that's to be done is to remove any excess swarf from the moulded plastic parts. Then I'll remove the moulded on details, which will be replaced by photo-etch parts. Specifically in the turret, this is the ladders on the side of the turret and the vents on the front face of the turret. This then brings us to the barrels, and we remove the moulded barrels from their bearings. I used the new barrels as a guide to tell me where to cut off both of the moulded barrels. This photograph shows a barrel set with the old and new barrels for comparison. Here we've drilled out the bearings, glued in the brass barrels, and laid out both barrels for comparison. The barrels here are now on their axle and ready for assembly. The turret has the photo-etched ladders and vent covers already glued on. You can also see here the drill bit which I used to drill out the bearings. It's a 0.5 mm drill bit. The gun barrels are mounted on the inverted turret and then glued in place with a spot of polystyrene glue. This is done on a flat surface to ensure that the barrels have the same elevation. Now, when both barrels were completed, I dry mounted them on their respective decks. Turret Anton is the top example and turret Dora the bottom. The moulded barrels which are removed are shown for comparison. Here we see all of the parts, photo-etch and plastic moulded parts for turret Bruno. Turret Caesar is the same. We've the same photo-etched ladders and vents in the front face and barrels, but we also have the platform for the 40mm mounting, which is on top of the turret, with its associated boxes and railings. In addition, these turrets are built in rangefinders for local control, so they are extra, as are the photo-etch flaps which cover the optics. Here the turret is assembled with the brass barrels fitted, but before any other photo-etch has been attached, a problem has arisen which now needs addressing. When I was putting the turret hoods on, no, not the turret hoods, the rangefinder hoods, they did not fit well at all into the depressions on the side of the turret that they were supposed to. They were basically a little bit too large all round, and what that has meant is that now that they're on and glued, there are gaps at the top and at the back of each of the parts. So these are going to have to be filled and sanded. So I thought I'd just take you through that process. So we're going to use cotton wool buds for smoothing it out, and we're going to use a cocktail stick, as they are known in the UK, toothpicks in America, to apply it. So what we want to do is get a little bit on the end of the cocktail stick. When you open it up, it's a white material. It's kind of plasticky, like putty almost. Well, it is putty. And you just get a little on the end of the cocktail stick and start to work it into the gap. I find it easier if you've got both. If you've got the piece on in your hands when you do this, just push it into the gap. Leave it proud. You don't need to be too careful with this, because it's going to get a sanding afterwards in a little while. So what you do is you just push it into the gap, overdo it a bit, doesn't need to look pretty, and it won't look pretty at this stage. That's that one, and as you can see, it doesn't look desperately pretty. Now we'll get a little bit more on. And go to the other side. Just push it into the gap. Keep working away at it till the gap's been filled. And the gap in this instance is on top and towards the back. That's looking better. If there's obviously a great dollop too much sitting somewhere, you can pull that off. But when it comes to the sanding, it's actually quite easy to sand. It sands quite smooth, and it's quite soft when it's set. So I'm going to leave that like that. Doesn't look pretty at all. I'm going to, hang on, I don't know if you can see that. I'm going to leave it like that. It doesn't look pretty at all, but we'll come back in a little while when this is hardened. It's actually hard enough to work in about an hour. I prefer to leave it a little bit longer because I don't want to get into it and discover that it's still soft under the surface, if you like. So I prefer to give it a couple of hours. Well, I just want to come back and put the putty on. The next thing that we can do before we leave it to set properly is that we can smooth it off slightly. Now, this is why I have a cotton wool bud here. Just get it a bit wet, and then you can just work away with it over the surface, and it takes the roughness off it. There's no need to try and get a beautiful finish on it, because we can file and sand it later to get a nice clear finish. But all you're really trying to do just now is get a general smooth finish on it. It's a little bit better. If necessary, that could be painted over as it stands, but I'd like to try and get it a little bit neater. So we'll let that dry now. It'll take a couple of hours before I'm confident of working it. It'll probably dry in an hour, but I would like to give it a couple of hours to get it properly hardened before we come back and we sand it and file it. So we'll come back shortly and have a look at that. Here we have turret Bruno, but now with the repairs completed. The photo-etch vent and optic covers are fitted and the ladders have been installed. The parts for the gun platform, the base, rails, boxes are all laid out and will be fitted. These are the parts for the 40mm gun laid out with a 20p coin for size comparison. Very tiny parts, but there is a problem. I would like someone from Flyhawk to explain to me in detail how this is supposed to be assembled, because I can find no way of making it work. I've tried every which way of getting the barrel and the breech into the brass mount and the flaps folded up round it. I can't do it without pieces breaking off, and so I've decided to mount the moulded plastic gun into the folded brass mounting and discard the remaining little pieces. The moulded plastic gun itself is quite a detailed moulding. So here we see the completed 40mm weapon mounted on top of turret Caesar with turret Dora below, and here Bruno with its 40mm mounting and Anton below. We'll just have a brief look at the 10.5cm mounting as we're running very tight on time now. Here are all of the parts which make up this mount. There are replacement brass barrels and a number of very small photo-etched parts to be added. Just how small can be seen here with my fingertip. So after a lot of thought and consideration and some testing, I decided that the majority of these parts were just not helpful. The mounting is reasonably well moulded, and putting some of these parts on would be extremely difficult to do well, and could make the unit look worse rather than better if it was done badly. So this is how I completed the turret, with barrels, 2 plates on the front face and 2 hatches on the side of the turret.
Well, that brings us to the end of episode 3, and I'm a bit disappointed because we've really run completely out of time. I'd wanted to go into a bit more detail on the 10.5cm mountings and on the 40mm mounting, and frankly we've not been able to do that. So we will cover them in a lot of depth later on. There's also the painting to be looked at. We didn't do any painting at all in this episode, and I'd hoped that we'd get that done as well. So that will come along in another episode later on as well. So moving on now to episode 4, we're going to cover the decks. We're going to look at applying the Artwox wooden decks. We're going to look at putting on any photo-etched brass parts that are needed. We've already painted them, so really that should cover the whole of episode 4, and we should get all of that done. So I look forward to seeing you then.